All right, so let's quickly recap that. Okay, so I gave you this very concrete example about building a graphical UI system, a very simple one. Okay, just try to simulate the idea. And then I mentioned there are a lot of this kind of widgets, such as button, images, reading bars, text areas. These are all very individual widgets that you use are very common in UI systems. But there are also some kind of containers, such as window, right? And then the window could contain normally some widget like this. All right. So this is the initial version we built. We split all of them and save them individually. And then also we call different method names for different kind of widget, but it's actually for the same purpose, just try to refresh and render things. And we realize this is very bad because there's so many if statements and they're trying to do something very similar. And a very quick solution we made was to introduce this widget interface. And then with that interface, we define one unified method called render. So all of these classes like button, checkbox, image, menu bar, reading bar, text area, they all become a kind of widget. So they implement this widget interface. So everybody just implement this method here. And then this one really simplified this window class. As you can see this time, you just have one list of widgets, all right? So it can be any kind of widgets as long as it follows that interface. And then this part here also being simplified. And now if you try to add and extend another type of widget, it's really easy, okay? However, we still kind of differentiate the widgets and also the containers. I give you an example. If you have another type of thing like this, screen, where screen can contain everything. It can contain some windows, can contain some widgets. Well, you do have to differentiate them, something like this. All right. And the question we had at the end was how can we easily merge this two and also to enable some kind of like a nested containment. So a window can contain another window, or a window can contain another like a container, something like that. Or maybe one time we can also have app screen to contain another app screen. So all this kind of flexibility. And then it turns out that solution is pretty straightforward. So what we want to do is we actually define this same interface called widget, but this time, besides having the button and checkbox to implement this interface, we also want like window to implement that this in the same way. All right, so window also become a widget, and the window will also have the same method called render, which does the same thing. But now the window will contain the same list of widget, but this time you can see the widget could also become another window. And that's how you can easily implement this kind of flexible, multi-level containment relationship. And then from here, you can see the window can contain buttons, can contain a text area, but also can contain another window. That window can contain more windows, as many levels as you want. And then because of doing that, and your app screen can also be simplified. So everything is only about one type, which is widget. We really don't care whether it is individual widget or it's a container. Okay, so that's what this pattern tells us. Okay, composite pattern. Try to merge the individual types and the composite types together. This is the standard way of writing this pattern. We did not follow this clearly, like 100%. We'll talk more about that. So in the pattern, they said that you can create this interface, which we have, and then this operation called, in our case, called render. And then you have both the leaves and also the composite to implement this interface. A very important thing I explained last time was this part here, that this association is really important. All right, because this one means that the composite can contain another component, and the component could be leaf, could be another composite. So that's how you can implement something like this, right? So it's a composite has leaves, composite, and this composite can have other leaves or another composite. You can do as many levels as you want. But this association is the key to implement that. All right. If we go a little bit more details, okay, so this component declares the interface for the composite and then implement the base behavior. So this one here, we haven't used that one. You know, they're trying to do things like add a component, remove, get, because you're trying to get a list of components. So they put it here in the interface, where in our case, we only put it here in the composite. Like in the window, you gotta get the list, get the widget, but then we don't have the things here. And obviously, if you put it here, then all the leaves also need to implement this one, and which is not very good. So that's why I wouldn't recommend putting it here. But there are also the advantage of putting it here, which is, you know, it really, you don't have to define the extra method here. Anything here you can just do add and remove. So there's a trade-off. But in general, I think putting it down here will be much better than putting it here, because we also talk about this principle called, you know, substitution principle. If you define anything in the interface, you should make sure that it applies to our children. All right, so that's why I wouldn't recommend putting it here. But then in the pattern, this is the one way to do it, depending on, you know, what they're looking for. Okay, then the composite is basically has a list. That's very important, so that you can do this kind of iteration to iterate all your list and then call the same operation. All right, that's another component. And leave is the simplest one. Just do the behavior you specify. All right. So that is the whole composite and pattern idea. And then the only thing I didn't mention last time was this issue where to place the container operations. Obviously, there's two ways. What this is what I mentioned. One way you can put it here, okay, or you can leave it empty. That's what we do, you know, in our example. We only put it here, okay. This one I really like it because it doesn't mess up the hierarchy, because not everything has this behavior, so you shouldn't put it into the parent, and we only do it here. But then when you do it here, the only downside is if you want to call this method, you have to cast the type into composite. You can't just call it directly. If these are just a widget, you can't call add, remove, get, because they're not visible here. They're not visible here. Where if you use this solution, it is visible because it's already defined in the interface. All right. So the lesson we got was, if you are trying to do a lot of these operations about add, remove, those kind of things, probably using this approach is better, because it's easier for you to call them. However, in our case, if we just want to initialize everything, that's it. We're not going to dynamically add or remove a lot of things or call this very often. This one for sure is better, because I give you the most reasonable hierarchy. The other way is not a valid hierarchy if you think about some of the principle. So a trade-off here, but I would say that this approach will be much better than the other one, because the other one is very, very confusing. You define all this method here, which doesn't apply to the leaf classes. All right, that's kind of a quick go through of this whole composite pattern. So, you know, you really need to look at the slides and also go through the code, okay? And then try to implement something by yourself. But then really the value of this pattern, okay, the secret of pattern lies on here. Okay. This unlocks this intersection. That's how this pattern becomes so powerful. It really simplifies the whole structure of your you know, hierarchy, and also all this containment relationship. All right. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, I'm gonna move on to the next pattern. Okay, this pattern is much more important. Okay, this pattern is not gonna be an interview pattern, but it is so practical in reality, and it's being used so often. This is also my favorite pattern. Okay, it's called observer pattern. So let's talk about this one. All right. So what are we trying to do here? We want to define a one-to-many dependency between objects, so that when object changes state, all the dependents are notified and updated automatically. So it's about some kind of a notification thing, update and a notification. So that's why sometimes called a publish subscribe. And then this is you know, also a very typical name. Just like you subscribe some kind of a topic, you subscribe some newspaper. Whenever there are new things going on, they will let you know. So that is what the pattern is trying to solve. Here is one like example. In reality, let's say that a professor want to schedule a exam, so he want to notify the secretary and also all the student. There is going to be exam, so we expect the secretary will book the room, and also students should prepare the exam. And then to set something in code to simulate this kind of scenario, we call set exam, and then the secretary will call this method to book a room, and then we iterate all the student, and then every student will study and prepare. All right, so that's how the code will look like for this logic. Pretty straightforward, but there are some issues. All right, so whenever we're doing this one, well, we need to know who are involved. Okay, we need to know there is a secretary. We also need to know there are students involved. All right, but what if we need to add another one? Okay, so for example, we need to tell a janitor to clean the room first, and then we need to know that party and then call the message. And also, same like a composite pattern example, some of these methods are different. Student need to do study, and the secretary do book room, and who knows what other methods we will need for different party. And also, not everyone will be interested in this one, right? Some of you might be interested in preparing for the exam. Some of you already know it, they don't need to know it, and they don't need to do it. Or some people just don't like it and they don't want to do it, so they don't want to receive that notification. Probably. So, but then this code doesn't do that. It just gave everyone that same notification. All right. So the motivation here is how can we do this kind of a notification without having to know how many people there are, how many parties there are, and also without having to know who they are, so that I don't need to call different things. And also, I don't need to know who is really interested and who is not. To really simplify this kind of a notification process. So that is the motivation of this pattern. Now, let me give you some concrete example. You understand why this one is so useful. Let's say you're building a stock market, trading platform. Okay, let's talk about NASDAQ, right? So we don't know exactly how the software being built, but then you can imagine there had to be a server. Okay, a centralized server. This must be centralized. There is one server that is authentic. That is the real time, all the data coming into there that controls and records all the price. Okay, so it's probably somewhere in New York City. Okay, in Manhattan. All right, and then so as the trading are going on, the price, everything has been changed and updated all the time. But when we are looking at all this data, now we are using all different clients. Rarely you have access to this server to directly look at the data. So we use Google Finance, we use Yahoo Finance, we use different apps, Robinhood, right, very popular app, and then all the other things. Okay, so we use all different clients trying to visit the same thing. They're all watching the same kind of copy of the data. Whenever data got changed, then they need to reflect those changes in their clients. However, as we watch all the stock, everyone watches different things. Some of you might be interested in Google tech stock. Some of you might be interested in some other like a non-tech kind of industry. All right, but then when things are changing, you only want to see the things that you're interested. You don't need to see all the changes. And it's overwhelming. There are too many stocks going on. All right, so that is the situation. So how can we make sure that whenever things are updated, we tell the right client and we send them the right things, only thing they care about in that specific client for that specific user. All right, so that's one situation. That's exactly how you've been using, okay, using some of this Google. And I don't know let me find an example. If you go to browser, and then we go to Google Finance. Wow, they actually changed the UI. So if you look at here in my watch list, okay, this is my watch list. Obviously, I only care about the tech stocks. I think it's already closed to the market today. Okay, so anyway, so if it's not closed, And let me see if you click on one of these. Yeah, I think there's still some changing going on after the hours. But if you only look at these things, then they will only give you the updates to this stock you're watching. You're not going to receive notification for everything other than the ones you care about. Okay, so very easy to understand. You have your list, and then you only receive the notification on those changes. All right, so this number is really crazy. All right, when I was in the company back in 2010, 11, it was here. Okay, no, actually I joined in 2011. 11 is already like increased a lot. It's somewhere here. That's when I was in company. $180, $200, right? And then I think that that time Amazon gave me 50,000 stock. But I don't have those. Okay, so they didn't give me right away. They gave you only 5% in year one, and I really didn't think that's a big deal. Think about it. It's a $50,000. Okay, that's what you got, and total worth of stocks. And then this is that time is about like $180. So total they gave me is 277 shares. Okay, that's the total number of shares. So if I have all of those today, that's actually a lot actually. So that will be 87 and almost $1 million, right? So if I keep those one today, but I don't have it because in year one you only get 5%. So by the time I finish year one, I only have 13 shares. I actually didn't. So the story was I worked in Amazon for almost 11 months. So one more month, I will get that 13 shares. And I just didn't think this is gonna work anything. All right, I just quit it and then just didn't get that 5%. Okay. Um, I wish I changed my mind. I think I was a little bit too rush. I quit to join that startup company, but I should actually wait a little bit. At least get that 13 shares, right? That 13 shares that also worth um well, it's already worth like the total amount of the stock they gave me at that time. So anyway, so it kind of a how to say this one is it's kind of a lesson that um, a lot of people actually go to reach actually with company like this. Okay, you can be rich in my situation even if I stay. I mean that give you $1 million stock. Not bad. But then if you can jump in a little bit earlier than that, I do see people working here. Okay, around here. There are a lot. There inside company it's not uncommon to see people around this period of time in Amazon. Okay, 2003, five this period of time. There are a lot of people. Okay, and then they might get more shares at that time. Okay, even though they might not get that much money, but then they may get hundreds of shares. Either let's say 500 shares. It's not much. If you see, let's say that here the stock was only $20, and if the company gave you 500 shares, that's only $10,000. It's not much, but that's back in 2003. Okay, it's maybe very common. $10,000 not bad. But then if you hold 500 shares today, that's actually a lot, right? 500, that's $1.5 million. But I can tell you, I heard a story from a accountant here in Irvine. Then he told me one of his clients' brother was in a company in the late 90s, and then he has over like $40 million worth of Amazon stock. He's still working in Amazon, and then he still hasn't sold the stock yet. So it's kind of tell you a very simple rule that for stock, if you're interested in stock investment, I highly disencourage you guys to do this. If you do it, just do it long term. Okay. There's a book called long term to win, something like that. Okay, you can. I forgot what the long term to win. Is that a book? No, it's what's the name of the book? Um, that's a book. Uh, I forgot that. Yeah. Anyway, it's very simple. Because if you look at all these graphs, if you can hold anything for long, and the returns are actually pretty good. Okay, pretty good if you look at any of those stocks. Okay, and sometimes people might say, oh, of course, in the past 10 years it was a very good time. It is very true. You rarely see the past 10 years. I have to say I miss this past 10 years. I was in the industry for the past 10 years, but I didn't really pay much attention to the stock. I had a very little things, but then it's kind of be ignored. Spend most of my time in startups. But it doesn't matter if you don't. Some people say right now it's very high. It's okay. Don't worry. It will probably crash one time. But then if you look at another 30 years, and it will go up for sure. Okay, there's no doubt about it. So there's really no much risk if you look at long term. Don't worry about like short-term fluctuation. So there's one strategy called like you put some kind of fixed plan. For example, every month, okay, you put $1,000. You take 10% of your paycheck and then buy some stock. So you do that every month. You don't need to worry about how high or how low it is. That's okay, because eventually it's going to split all the risks. And then if you look at long term, most of these months will give you returns. Okay, that's definitely a good strategy if you keep it long term. But I have to tell you, it's easier said than done. Everyone understand it. If you ask everyone, okay, long term to win, long term to gain, everyone get it. Okay, there's no one who would disagree it. However, if you like the percent of people that can stick with the plan and really hold it for long, that's not that many. Okay, the reason you can try it. One day you buy this stock. That's why I don't like want you to jump into the stock market early. Once you hold this thing here, I can guarantee you're gonna open your app every single day to look at this price. Okay, you're gonna get addicted. Okay, you're not you're this is gonna be the first thing you open every day rather than your social media app or rather than your game app, because that thing can generate the money for you. It feels really good. You wake up late, in the morning. Okay, you miss your class. It's already 11. You woke up, you laying on your bed and you open your phone and look at your stock. You actually made $100 because the stock actually went down today 5%. That feels really good. Okay, that's why you will get very addictive to it, and I would say it's gonna disencourage you to do anything else, because you suddenly feel that making money using the stock is so easy. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to talk, and then you don't need to work. Why don't I just stay in my comfort zone and look at the computer, do some math and calculation, do it, and then you spend more and more time on it. And when you are starting to see those kind of fast gains, like $100 within a day or so, a week, you're gonna do more and more. And then you're not gonna wait for 10 to 30 years. I can tell you, you won't wait for that long. Okay. That's the kind of the nature of this whole stock market. So it's easier said than done. So you need to be very disciplined if you do the professional trading. All right, and then just don't do that, guys. You will lose really badly, really bad. Okay, that kind of trading, it's pretty much you will lose for sure. Guaranteed. It's guaranteed. Okay, you might make some quick money in the beginning. I can guarantee the more trade you do, the more transaction you do, the more you do. It's just like a gamble. It's a basic like gamble. I would even spend the time to play tax hold'em. I won't do that. Okay, you probably have a better chance to play tax hold'em if you follow some good rules, than doing the stock. However, if you do long term, the risk is pretty low. Okay, because you look at any kind of history over the time, you're talking about 10, 20, 30 years, especially 30 years, it's going to be gain and gain dramatically. 10 years is hard to say. Let's say if you jump into, here is the peak, and then if you look at that 10 years, this 10 period, if you're very, very bad luck, okay, you enter the market at very high, but exited, not exited, but then 10 years later, maybe still not much. But then if you look at 20 years, even you are very high at this point, now yours is already like maybe 10 times more than that at least. Okay, still good returns. So long term, that's the key, guys. Okay, unless one day you have the ability to do a very professional trading, of course there are people making money with that. It's just much more difficult. So that's why my true advice to you guys is, while we're still young, let's work on something more, concrete. Okay, do some real work, do some real project that that generate value, rather than spend all your uh, time on this one at this point. Okay, all right. So, sorry, what is that, Rafi? Oh, a mathematician just makes a lot of money. All right. Yeah. Yeah, there for sure there are professional organization investors that definitely makes money with that, but uh, very rare. Okay, very rare. So, well, of course there are people going in New York City. They're all doing this one. Um, just that's why when you're doing this one by yourself, okay, as a loan, as an individual, there's almost no chance you can win for the short term. Okay, I'm only talking about for the short term. All right, this is much more professional than you saw. And then also when this guy they have more money, when you have more fun, it's also easier, a little bit easier than your like your own personal like a bank account. That's not gonna let you do too much. All right, so that's one example. One more example. We also can look at like sports, right? So when these days the sport kind of got stuck, but now you start to see more and more sports going on. Not sure how many of you are watch college football, but that's definitely getting more and more popular these days. Still a lot of people actually go to the stadium if you look at the games. Anyway, so for sports, there are so many different sports going on, especially on the weekend, and then different people are watching the news and the scores, and you using different clients again, ESPN, some of the apps, but also there are different games. You might be a Lakers fan, you only watch Lakers, and then some others just only look at NFLs. And then even for the NFL, there's different teams. You only care about certain teams. So as you're watching these apps, you only want to get a notification when the things you care about, um, whenever there's an update on the score and the news, everything. So that's another situation. There's a tons of big data here, but when they are changing, they want to notify the right person, right client, right game, and right moment. Okay, it's a very complicated notification relationship if you think about that. All right, so that's what the pattern is trying to solve. And then if you also look at the social media, it's also follow the same model, right? Everybody is posting updates, but then you'll only see the changes from your friends. Okay, you're not gonna see the random changes notification from the people you don't know, unless it's an ad. All right, so that's another kind of good usage of this pattern. All right, so this is how the algorithm pattern works. Okay, it's really follow this publish, subscribe, maximum. Okay, so if you want to receive a notification, you subscribe it first, and then that publisher will know to notify you because you already told them that you are interested. And then so you need to have something called a subject. That's actually uh, um, the um, the content, the data that has all the things people care about, such as stock price, game scores. Observer are the one that are going to watch those things and do something with it, refresh and show the scores in their app, all of those. All right, so these are the two things that's very important. So let's take a look at the pattern. Okay, this is how the pattern is going to work. So this time I'm going to show you the structure first, and then we will see how we can follow this pattern to build our application. All right. So you have a subject. There are two kind of a hierarchies. Now this is one hierarchy on subject, and then this one here is about the observers. So subject, I already explained. Stock is a subject. Game is a subject. So anything that has the data, anything that will be updated is a subject. So we have a parent class subject, and then we also have, a bunch of concrete subject. So there is one hierarchy. On the other hand, I mentioned about like Google Finance, ESPN. These are our clients that watch this subject. So they are called observers. Observer, we need an interface first. And then you can build as many observer, concrete observers as you want. Observer want to do something called update. If something update happens, then you need to basically run something, refresh the data, refresh the dashboard, all of those. And there are two important relationships. Subject has a list of observers because the subject needs to know who are observing them. So the subject to track them. Observer need to have access to the subject, because when I need to update my thing, you told me that something gonna change. So what did it change? I need a way to get those changes, get the current status. All right. So that's too important association. So because we have this one, then in the subject, you can then have these two methods. One is called attach an observer or detach an observer. All right. And then you can say notify. I want to notify all of them whenever I want. And then for here, you need to provide some method for people to get the current status, getter and setter, especially for getter. All right. So this is how this pattern will work. All right. So let's jump into the code and then show you how this whole thing works. Go and create a new project. All right. We open my. So I guess I'm gonna stick with either the stock or you know, the game example. Okay, maybe let's do the game example. All right. So we're talking about like a notifying the sports game, different type of games. All right, and then so we're gonna follow the structure this time to build it. Okay, I want to build a subject first. All right, a subject. So the subject has this method and code. So I'm gonna try to use the abstract class this time. So I'll create a new subject, and then this is a abstract class. Subject class has, again, 3 methods, and then it also has a list of observers, because if you want to track who are the observer, you need to have the list to track them. So I'm going to do a private list observers. Right? And then we don't have observer yet, so we need to build one. All right, so this is the default one. We're not going to use that one. So I'm going to create an observer interface. So this one here is an interface because it only has one method called update. So I'm going to build an interface called observer. Observer interface has one thing called update. All right. So that's what we have first. If you have this one, well, we need 2 more methods. One is called attach, one is called detach. Attach. So basically the observers need to add observer. Just add it to the list. And then you also have detach. If you don't want certain observer from the list, just get yourself out of the list. Right? And then obviously we need to instantiate. So I'm going to put it here, okay, just to all right, so this is the way that you can manage observers. Because of that, I made the abstract class because I need to put some code here. There's another important one called notify. So that's when you try to notify all the observers, oh, something got to change, please update yourself. As you can see, they even gave you the implementation. Just do a for loop to iterate all the observers. So notify observers. All right. So all I'm gonna do is just iterate everyone. Say, please update yourself. All right. By the point I get here, you already kind of see the basic structure. Subjects need to know who are the observers. But then the subject doesn't know what type of observer you are. I don't care if it's an ESPN or a newspaper or some other website or some other app. But I know that they're all kind of type of observer. They all have this method called update. That's why I can just simply iterate everything and tell them one by one, update, update. Something got changed. When I call this one, then the observer themselves will do their work to update everything. So if you have a list, then you need to manage them. You need to attach them and detach them anytime you want. All right, so that's the basic structure for this subject class. All right, so let's not talk about observer for now, but right now observer is really easy that any kind of observer need to have something to update itself. All right, so now we finish this part, as well as this association. Okay, so let's see how we're going to build our actual application. So I mentioned let's build some games. I'm going to have some NBA game first. By the way, I didn't realize the Lakers actually got a championship until like a week ago. I didn't realize they're that good right now. Because last year they didn't do very well, right? And this year suddenly they just become a championship. Do we have any Lakers fans here? Yeah, that's true. All right. So we got NBA game, okay? The NBA game is something called a concrete subject, right? Because that's a specific thing we have. And so this one should be a type of subject. So we're going to extend subject, right? So if you look at the pattern, the concrete subject should have the specific state. So that means the specific data we want to record in the subject. So we're going to have the name of the game. You have the score. I'm going to just use a string to do it. Okay, it's easier. So I'm going to get a getter and the setters. That's how you can get and set all the state, just name and score and everything. All right, that's it. Okay, so now you see this one will finish get state, set state, and then the subject. All right, so that's what we have. All right. So once you have this, okay, later on, let me show you here. I'm going to create a driver. Now you could start to use this subject. You will see that NBA game. All right, you can create that one, and then you set the name. All right, and then also the score. Score, initially is 2.0. Okay, and from then on, you will keep updating it. Or something like this by calling the method. That's how you can update the content and state. All right, so that's how we can use this NBA game. All right. So let's keep building. Right now, you can't really see anything. Now we're going to talk about the notification. Since we're talking about notification, we need to see some kind of a client. So, okay, I'm going to build my first client, which is ESPN website. All right. So this one can show the score, in the web pages. So this one is a kind of observer. So I need to implement observer. Okay, that's what this one is here. Okay, we're trying to build this part here. Concrete observer that implements observer interface that can do its job to update the content. All right, So we need to add this method here to update it. So if something called us here, that means something got changed, right? So I'm gonna print the game data has been updated. And then we want to show what's the current data, current game name. Also, we want to show game score. All right. And finally, we got this ESPN website. Now go back to the driver. Right before the game, I will set up my website first. All right. So right now I run this code, nothing will happen. Yeah, so because we're not doing anything. And then let's finish this system. So we're talking about the notification. So let's say that ESPN is caring about this NBA game, and then we want to be updated every time when you get a score update. I want to print out all the naming information about the game, and then the score. So obviously we're still missing things. And then let's fix them one by one. All right. Number one, so let's go back to the website. So I'm trying to print out the name and the score of the game, but how? Where is the access to the game? Can anyone give me some ideas? I want to print name and score, but I don't have any relationship set up yet. What's missing here? The subject, right? So if you want to print out this name and score, I need to have access. Okay, I need to have access to the subject. In this case, it's NBA game. So there must be some kind of association with it. Otherwise, I can't do anything. So if you go look at the pattern, that's what this one is used for. In this class, there must be association goes to that subject in certain ways. That's how you can actually get information from it. All right. And there are different ways to build it. And then one popular way to do that is we need to modify this one. So when you are sending us the notification, oh, something got changed, and you need also send us actual subject. All right, so this is what I'm going to do, guys. Look at it carefully. This is how you build this the association. Okay, I'm going to put subject here and then subject. So that means when somebody is telling you, okay, I as a subject got updated, you should also ask that subject to send it back to you so that you have the access right here in this method and can do your thing. Okay, so with that, I'm going to modify my interface. And then here, you will get a subject. All right. So if you do this, now you can then print get game name, get name, but why it's not showing up here? I want to do game name, right? It's actually this one here. I got get name, get score. So that's what I want to do. Print get name, get score, but why it doesn't work? Okay, very careful because this is a type of a subject. I can only do the things available here from the subject, which has attach, detach, and notify. I do not have this ones available, even though you might send me the right object. All right, so I need to cast the type. That's how you can do it. Right. Of course, a better way is you need to check and make sure if the subject is a type of NBA game. Otherwise, this one is going to throw the error. So how do we check the type of the object in Java? Very good. Instance of. All right, so I'm going to move this line here as well. All right. So now this one will actually be able to access the subject. All right, it's a very simple code here, but it actually gave you that kind of association. Without this one, you can't get anything from the subject. All right, so there's another error here we need to fix, because now the observer said that when you call me to update, don't just call the method, send your subject. So how should I put in here? What should I put in here? Observer requires that you give us the subject. So in the subject, when you're trying to notify observer, I'm changing, okay? Update yourself, but then you also need to give that subject. So how should I code it? Yes, just do this. All right, because this is the subject. I'm just sending myself over. And then you will have the access. All right. This one will send this subject over, and then, so this one here will receive it. Sorry, this one here will receive it and have the access. And then finally, I go back to my driver. I'm gonna run it. Still nothing happens. So what happens here? What else are we missing? So this is my observer. This is my subject. Subject score being updating, but I don't see anything because I was expecting to print out all of this stuff. So what is missing here? If you follow my code, what are the things missing? Yes, we did not call the update. This one here is notify, right? But then we're already calling it. So where should we call it? And when should we call it? So some of you might think, something like this, right? Every time when you set a score, I'm going to notify all. Set score, notify all. That's when this one will be triggered, and then this one will be executed, right? Is there a better way to write this part of the code? Very good, right? Yeah, so you can just put it inside the NBA game, right? So whenever you change the score, I will just notify the observers. This method comes from the parent. Every time when somebody changes the score, this will be automatically called. So this is so much better than you calling it here, because sometimes people don't even remember to call it. But now I only focus on changing my score. That's it. Every time we need to change, it will trigger this function. This function is in a parent, which will iterate all the observers and then call them. Okay, run it. Still nothing happened. What else are missing? So set score, notify, update, This one will be update. So what else are missing, guys? Can you see it? Yes, attached to observer, right? So the ESPN is not really attached to anyone. You're not subscribing to the NBA game. That's a problem. All right, so once you set up a game, all right, so you need to say that I want to subscribe it. If you want to subscribe it, then add yourself to this game as one of the observers. That's where you use attach. Here, you got to attach. You add yourself to the list. So when we are iterating it, you will be in that list. So I go back here. Let's run it. All right, so now it works. The game data has been updated. This is name and score, name, score, name, score. And now it works. And now we completed the implementation using the observer pattern. Okay. So let's look at this one more time, okay? 4 components are involved. Subject, abstract class, manages the list of observers, doing all the updates. Concrete subject is a subclass. Make sure you call the notification whenever you change your state. You need an interface observer, and then you implement the concrete observers. But then when you do this, make sure that you can receive the access to the subject. Otherwise, you can't do anything with it. And also, when you start to use, don't forget to add yourself to the list. Otherwise, you will not be notified. Attach method is very easy. It's basically just adding this thing into the list. You have a list. Attach is adding your thing, adding your observer to this list. Detach is remove it from the list. There's nothing really special here. Okay, so this is how the pattern works. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Okay, it's actually a very cool pattern. Okay, it really makes this whole notification thing so simple. And then also, as always, when we evaluate the design good or not, we talk about changes, extensions. Okay, so I'm gonna build my second observer, which is Cal Poly. What is our paper? There's a paper. The Cal Poly newspaper. Oh yeah, Poly Post. I somehow always feel that this paper is very critical. Do you guys realize that? It's actually always report some of the bad things about the campus. Not sure if that's a purpose. Okay, I'm a little bit surprised to see that paper. At one point, I don't know any one of you are involved with the newspaper. At one point, there was a, yeah, it's there was one student trying to interview me about this air AC issue. I was very nervous. I feel that he was going to ask me a lot of negative questions, and if I say something, I feel that I'm going to get into trouble. So I didn't really took that interview when I learned that he's from this Poly Post. I know they're going to complain some AC issue, so I know their purpose is good, but I don't feel that I want to get involved in the kind of a trouble. But anyway, so let's say Poly Post, okay? Poly Post here, update. You know, as a campus in the LA area, so we also care about NBA games. So if subject is instance of NBA games, all right, so we're gonna print it. Poly Post probably do something differently. Okay, some different UI. Poly Post lines. All right, and then they're gonna also show you the game. let's just differentiate them. All right. So we're adding a new observer. And then I'm going to create this new observer. All right. So let's run this code. So this one here, I've been updated from ESPN. Let's actually add some kind of a thing here, okay? So we know this one is from ESPN. Go back here, run it again. All right, ESPN got this information updated, but not polypost, because polypost is not one of the observers, so they're not going to get updates. So if polypost decide I want to also join this observer, be notified, that's okay. Just call this method attach yourself. If I'm going to run this again, okay, every time when the score changed, ESPN reported, polypost reported, ESPN, polypost, ESPN, and then polypost. All right. And then you keep going. 1 point. Lakers losing. All right, this is very frustrating. And then polypost decide, I don't want to look at this again. Okay, I'm going to detach myself. Game 1, detach polypost. So when the game ends, final score, and you won't receive it. So previously both are reporting until this score happens, okay? And then polypost stop reporting it. So final score only you see ESPN, you don't see the polypost again. Yeah. So Christian, why is not relevant to interview? Because you can't ask people to write this one during the interview. It's too much. Very difficult. You know, it's going to take you like 15 minutes to write the whole thing and very hard to check it. But then if I ask you to describe it, there really not much you can describe. And if you don't see the code, if you don't write a code, then it's not much meaningful, right? So yeah, but in practice, it's very practical. Normally, when we say, oh, you know what, I'm going to do a observer pattern to do it, and then everyone can get it what it looks like. So yeah, just from the practical point of view, it's very difficult to ask people to write this one. Yeah, but very useful pattern. Okay. Let's make one more change. Now we got one more game. Okay, not NBA game. This time we're gonna do, make some extensions. NFL game. All right. Name. Score. Yeah, not a score. So you know what? Let's do a different one. Okay, so because these are both game are the same. So let's just say, some maybe the election polls. Okay, so we'll refactor it. Okay, I'll call it LA poll. All right, and then maybe we just do some kind of percentage. Okay, percent. Again, I'll just use string to simplify everything. All right, and then whenever you set percentage, just notify all observers. Oh, sorry, I didn't extend the subject. So this is another subject. All right, so whenever something's gonna change, just notify everyone, okay? And then for the observer, obviously ESPN doesn't care about politics. So the Poly Post, for sure, this is going to be a good place to do something like this. If it's instance of LA pool. All right, so I'm going to print this again. All right, so they're going to also something like this. All right, now I'll go back to my driver. I have my second subject here. By the way, guys, how do you feel about the poll these days? Okay, you know, obviously Biden is leading, but you know, a lot of people are are very worried that it's not gonna win. So I'm not sure about your opinion. All right. Okay, set the name. Election 2020. Set percentage. So we'll say like 52 versus 46, whatever. Okay. All right, and then you can keep changing it. Oh, you haven't decided, Nick? Are you waiting for the debate or what are you waiting? All right. Okay, so this time here, and let's say that I want to add Poly Post to this observer. So that change will be notified to Poly Post only. Sorry, yeah, that's right. So that's, I'm gonna do this one. All right, so let's look at the output, okay? So politics first, because this one got updated first. Once and twice only, Poly Post, not ESPN. But then when it gets the games, and then both will report it, and until at the end, Poly Post quit. And then you can just mix them, doesn't matter, right? So it's just all newspapers, and they will just do the update all the time. And then, all right, so if I add two more updates, I'm gonna run this again. All right, so that's gonna see the mixed. Anytime whoever updates, the ones who are watching will be updated, will be called. So at the end that you can see, really the good benefits, all right? You can easily add and remove subject and observers, and then you can configure all this, you know, subscription anytime you want. And then it makes the update so simple. Everyone eventually only focus on changing the data. Whenever data got changed, everyone got refreshed and updated automatically, notified automatically. Okay, so this is how the observer pattern works. Okay, it's a very cool pattern, guys. I really like it because once you have set up this structure, the rest thing, when you try to use this one, it's so clean. As you can see, you just set up all this attach, detach thing, and then all you need to care about is changing the score. All right. So if I move the code a little bit, I'm gonna move this games together. Okay. Let's assume you actually set up initialize all the things first, and then I'm gonna put all this attach, detach together. So the rest are all about notification. You don't need to do anything. Just keep changing the content. All right, that's it. Unless one part you want to detach it. And everything, every party will be notified. You know, again, this is a very small example with only 2 observers, 2 subject. But in reality, think about you got thousands of stocks, and then there are, you know, billions of people are watching their stocks. And at that time, the structure remains the same. Okay, that's when you can benefit from it. Yeah, so in Android, they use this pattern a lot. So we'll give you some examples. Okay, for today, just focus on the code to be able to know how this pattern works. Now we'll give you assignments. Okay, pay attention to these patterns. Okay, all the pattern we talk about, singleton, composite, observer, and next time we'll talk about visitor pattern. Now you will actually use this four pattern in your next assignment. So definitely we'll give you a chance to write and use them. All right. So I'm gonna just stop here today. Okay, I want you to kind of really read the code and then try to understand, how everything being put together. There's some more concept to cover about this pattern, but for now, try to understand the major structure and the hierarchy first. Yes, I need to do this one to GitHub. So let me find this one should be. All right, so they are all here. Are they? Okay, so it looks like I need to get everything into a repository. That's not good. Hmm. Okay. Oh, okay. I can probably turn this whole folder into a repository. Okay, so that's probably better. In order to do that, let me actually clean up some of the things. Right. All right, guys. I work on this one to get everything into the repository. Okay, so that you can let me delete the things I don't need.